Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Wrestling Doesn't Make Sense. It's the show where me and John go back through wrestling history and talk about whether or not it makes sense. A lot of the time, it doesn't. And today, we're going to be talking about finishing moves, the most important part of a wrestling match. Wouldn't you agree? Doesn't matter the 20, 30-minute build-up all the way through the match. But once you hit that finishing move, bam, right?
I mean, I'd say the other stuff is still pretty important, but it's the moment you're kind of building to in a wrestling match, you'd say.
Yes, exactly. Obviously, the bit I just said was in jest. The match itself is very important, but like you said, it builds up. I feel like it doesn't do that as much as it used to, because back in the day, whenever people had like squash matches and stuff, the reason squash matches were effective was because it got people to see somebody's finishing move like really quickly, right? So say Kane had just debuted and you saw him against The Undertaker. Oh, wow, that's crazy. What's he going to do? And then next week on Raw, you just see him in like a 2-minute match and he just dominates somebody. But then when he hits the choke slam or his tombstone, you're like, oh my God, that guy's dead. It's the full stop. It's the period. It's the way to really signify that that's the end, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like because we don't really have squash matches anymore, we just have finishing moves. What that means is you just wait till the end of the match until you see a finishing move. And then once you see the finishing move, you're like, well, that's the end of that, which is a little bit anticlimactic kind of.
Yeah.
And then you get into the tricky spot, which the WWE have got into with NXT. I think AEW do as well, where people just start kicking out of finishing moves to add to the tension and to make you think that, oh, it's not the finisher, which is good if you do it in parts. If you do it in little dribs and drabs. But if you do it every fucking match, then you're like, well, why is it a finishing move?
I'd say that goes back to like the Attitude Era as well, where like pretty much every main event match would have people kicking out of each other's finishing moves and just kind of devaluing them, I guess.
Well, kind of, but it would depend on the person, I think. So, for example, we've seen people kick out of the pedigree.
Very rarely, though.
Well, you remember there's a very infamous bit. I think it was in the Royal Rumble match between Cactus Jack and Triple H.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a bit where Triple H hits his finish, the pedigree, on Mick Foley. And Mick Foley kicked out of it because he said to Triple H during the pin, he said, hey, why didn't you pedigree me on the thumbtacks? So Mick Foley kicks out of the pedigree, which nobody did. Nobody did, because this was at the point where Triple H was starting to rise up the ranks as a main eventer.
Mm-hmm.
He was really trying to put over the pedigree as a finisher move. Mick Foley kicks out of it, which puts over Mick Foley. So then Triple H has to pedigree him on the thumbtacks, which is a little silly. What do you think about it?
Yeah, it's a bit extreme. Like, he was pretty lucky not to get any in his eyes or anything.
But hey, that's Mick Foley for you. Always willing to give the people what they want. They want a little bit of drama. But you can see people sometimes kicking out of the pedigree, for example. But a guy like The Undertaker, people didn't kick out of the Tombstone Piledriver for a long time.
Yeah.
People didn't kick out of the Last Ride.
Mm-hmm.
And for good reason, because the Last Ride looks really fucking sore. Right? Now, this is another thing we need to talk about with finishing moves, is not just like their effectiveness, because we know they're supposed to be effective. It's the finishing move, but it's like the visual impact of it. And if you see a Tombstone Piledriver, you're like, whoa, dude, that looks any kind of Piledriver really, but a Tombstone really feels like it's impactful. And the Last Ride also feels like it's impactful because both of those moves have tension to them. There's a little period of waiting, just a little bit, where, Undertaker holds up a guy upside down, gets him in position, and he'll hold that for a second or two. Yeah. And everybody knows they're like, it's going to happen. And then he hits it. Same with the Last Ride. He'll do the Last Ride. He'll get everybody in position. Then he'll hoist them up and hold it for a second or two. and then throw him down, and that it's that little extra second that really makes a difference, you know. Although to be fair, him hoisting the guy up, it's a real power move, because we've all seen power bombs before, but it's the idea that the 7-foot tall Undertaker lifts you up for a power bomb and then lifts you a little bit higher and then hits you with it. Like, all of that looks really sore.
Yeah,
you know,
big
that
time.
looks like a finishing move. And the same, like we said with Kane, you know, he used to do the Tombstone Piledriver, but also whenever Kane would chokeslam somebody, that really looked like it hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think about the psychology of wrestling, all it is just like an elevated back bump. You know?
Yeah,
You're just
yeah,
taking
yeah.
a back bump. But the way he does it looks really painful. And I think that that's what's very impactful. And that's what got guys like Kane and The Undertaker over, because they would do these big power moves and they were capable of doing them. And they were able to do them in a way that made them look really effective. Because then if somebody kicks out of that, then you're like, holy shit. Remember, didn't Shawn Michaels kick out of the Tombstone?
Yeah, in the WrestleMania matches, I believe he kicked out of it in both of them. And I think he kicked out of the last ride in at least one of those matches as well.
But the reason that that's so impactful is because up until that point, the last ride and the Tombstone Piledriver had been very protected by that company because of The Undertaker. And the way he does them, and the way he does the fold in the arms, and he does the pinfall, you know, afterwards.
Yeah.
It's all part of the, you know, part of the same system. So to see somebody kicking out of that is big news, because you never see that. Those moves are very protected. But when you see them and somebody kicks out of them, it's a big deal, you know. Whereas if you look at something like the Rock Bottom, now I love the Rock. I love the Rock, but let's call a spade here, my friend. The Rock Bottom, not the most impactful looking move.
Not the most effective for getting a 3 count as well.
Exactly. It's like a Uranagi that Samoa Joe does every single match, right? And when Samoa Joe does it, he puts a bit of stank on it. You know what I mean?
Oh, big time, yeah.
Yeah. So it looks like it really hurts. And when The Rock does it, you know that that's just that when The Rock does it, it's the finishing move. It's The Rock's finishing move. So that's the end of the match. Like the People's Elbow. I mean, as much fun as it is to watch, it's an elbow drop.
Yeah.
Right? It's not it's not a finishing move, but he's won matches with that.
He's won loads of matches with that.
Exactly. So you're like, well, technically it is a finishing move. It's finished somebody off, but at the same time, it's just an elbow drop, right?
But then this is one of those ones where it's almost more about the crowd reaction rather than how impactful it is. Like, you're whipping the crowd into such a frenzy when, you know, he hits that people's elbow, that's when people are sort of ready to like count along with the 3 count and for the match to end. So it almost doesn't matter if it's just an elbow drop. It's all the theatrics that go with it, which makes it like a pretty iconic finishing move.
Right, exactly. Iconic, it definitely is. But then that raises in the question we were talking about a moment ago, where, you know, the effectiveness versus the spectacle. You know, it could look fun and it could look devastating, but either way, they're the finishing moves. They're the indicator that the match is over.
Yeah,
basically. And so, like, if you see somebody kicking out of the Rock Bottom or the People's Elbow, you wouldn't be that surprised.
No.
But again, how many times did people kick out of the Stunner?
Well, that was probably one of the most protected finishing moves of all time.
Yes, because the guy involved was Stone Cold Steve Austin, like the biggest guy in that company. So nobody else in that company used the Stunner ever. Nope. And the same with the Tombstone Piledriver. Nobody ever, except Kane and The Undertaker, would ever use the Tombstone Piledriver. Piledrivers, even at the time, I hope people weren't really using piledrivers. Like, it was the end of the beginning of the 2000s, they really kind of put the kibosh on that. But
yeah.
People would, like, Mick Foley used to do a pulling piledriver. And a couple of other people would do piledrivers, but
well, Jerry the King Lawler's finisher as well.
Yes. Well, he would say the hard punch too, wouldn't he?
I think he was mostly known for the pile driver, but then he kind of switched to the like diving fist drop off the second rope.
Yeah. Which, what?
Yeah.
Like, how's that more effective than a pile driver? See, that's the problem with pro wrestling. On the surface of it, you're like, yep, that's your finishing move. But when you kind of look into it and start to like question it just a little bit, you're like, some of this doesn't make any sense. Like we said, the rock bottom and the people's elbow, people are likely to kick out of those finishing moves all the time. But the Tombstone Piledriver or the Stone Cold Stunner, people don't kick out of those moves all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very interesting how they're same kind of level. They're both finishing moves, but some are more effective and look more effective than others.
I think with like the stunner as well, it had that sort of element to it where Austin could hit it from out of nowhere pretty much, and on like any kind of opponent, no matter how big or small they might be. So that kind of makes it more impressive in a way, or more memorable, because it's like he can hit it on Undertaker, he can hit it on Bret Hart, he can hit it on anyone, and then like you say, as soon as he does hit it, then that's game over. That's like 1, 2, 3. Steve Austin wins.
I mean, that's all of the 90s, isn't it?
I mean,
1, 2, 3. Steve Austin wins.
Most of the 90s. He didn't ever beat Bret Hart, I don't think, but
well, yeah, hey man, Bret Hart was the best there was.
Apparently so.
Understandable. But you raise another interesting kind of topic in the idea of being able to hit your finishing move on anybody. Because I've seen, for example, William Regal used to use like a butterfly suplex, kind of like an underhook powerbomb kind of thing.
Yeah.
But you couldn't see him doing that to The Undertaker.
Oh, no way.
That would look ridiculous. He just couldn't do it, right? And for that, you'd need some kind of other move. And then he used to do the knee trembler, as they call it, which was just a knee to the face.
Mm-hmm.
But that looks effective. It's simple, but you could hit that on anybody. If you double the Undertaker over, you can knee him in the face.
Yeah.
Shit like that makes a lot of sense, and it's very simple. It's very sports based. You're like, okay, there's no dicking around with that. Very straight to the point,
Mm-hmm.
So that's good. What about? Do you remember the Big Show used to do the knockout punch?
Yeah, the weapon of mass destruction.
Yeah, and people were like, that makes sense because he's the Big Show. If the Big Show punched me in the head, I'd probably die. So fair enough. But at the same time, you're like, the Big Show probably punches people a lot in his match before he hits the knockout punch.
Mm-hmm.
So why doesn't he just do the knockout punch?
Absolutely. You'd see him hit body shots all the time. So why not just aim a little higher?
Exactly. Then you start to question it a little bit. You're like, well, if he can knock people out with one punch, why doesn't he knock people out with one punch? That's the thing I've thought about with this Anthony Ogogo guy in AEW. I haven't seen a whole lot of his stuff, but I understand that he's winning matches by doing like kidney shots or like gut punches, right?
Yeah, it's the bolo punch they're calling it, where he just punches them sort of in the kidneys or the rib cage or whatever it is. But typically they'll go straight down once he's hit them and like sell it like death. But this past Sunday on Double or Nothing, he kind of hit Cody Rhodes with it pretty quickly, and Cody just kind of shrugged it off and then took a second one later in the match and still no-sold it and came back to win. So,
and you see, that sucks because they have spent the last couple of weeks, and I really mean like literally the last couple of weeks. We're not talking months here. We're not talking squash matches where people over a long period of time where people can understand what this guy is about and what he's capable of. We've seen a couple of those, and then straight into a match with one of the fucking, executive vice presidents of the company.
Mm-hmm.
Who really thought that was going to end any other way?
Yeah.
For example, we used William Regal earlier. We were talking about him being able to hit the knee trembler on anybody. If he had started off showing this move off to Scotty 2 Hotty and, fucking Funaki, and then 2 weeks later he was in a match with The Undertaker, you'd be like, I feel like you're getting to this a bit quick. And then if he hits that move on The Undertaker, and The Undertaker predictably no-sells it because, like we said, the main eventers are supposed to be somewhat protected, then you're going to think, hey, William Regal's just not ready for this spot right now.
Well, it also
he wasn't able to knock out The Undertaker.
The people who took it before, like the Scotty 2 Hotties and the Funakis, who did sell it like death, that makes them look even worse as well, because they're down for the count, whereas the other guy just like gets up and shakes it off and acts as if it is nothing.
Well, I think it makes the guy look worse. I don't think it makes Scotty 2 Hotty look bad, because we already know what position Scotty 2 Hotty has in that company. And if you see somebody putting away Scotty 2 Hotty very quickly, you know that guy's effective. But also, he beat Scotty 2 Hotty. That's not too much of a stretch. So to put him straight into a match with The Undertaker would be a bad move, because he needs to build himself up a little bit more and develop that finishing move and really get it over. Like, if they got to a point where Anthony Ogogo was like kayfabe injuring people for real, or, they made it seem like he was injuring people and putting them on the shelf, and then somebody from AEW had to step in and sort him out, and that guy happened to be Cody Rhodes, right? That would be a story. Yeah. But I feel like they rushed it too much, and now they've kind of like put the brakes on this Ogogo kid who has a boxing or like at least some kind of like sports background, right?
Yeah, he was a professional boxer until he kind of lost most of his eyesight in one of his eyes.
Good God. Oh, dear.
Yeah.
Oh, he lost most of his eyesight. And he's a pro wrestler?
Well, I mean, it's doable. The what's his name? PCO was famously wrestled with only one eye for donkey's years. So
I don't know. I don't know, but I mean, if I was in a contact sport and I had got hit in the head so much that it was very hard for me to see, I'd probably stop contact sports.
I mean, yeah, you'd think there's an inherent risk that like he could take even more damage to that eye and lose all of his vision in it.
Well, in wrestling, some of the fucking jabronis he's gonna have to fight. Right? Will you see him against Joey Janela and he's fucking up, right? Have you seen? Oh, I don't want to sidebar this, but have you seen the fucking clips of Joey Janela versus Hangman Page?
No, I don't think so.
Joey Janela like busts open Hangman Page by taking a powerbomb.
What? How?
Right. Hangman. Joey Janela hits the ropes. He's coming back, and then Hangman hits a pop-up powerbomb. So he lifts him up and puts him down. But as Joey Janela comes down, his left foot cracks Hangman in the face. You're like, how?
What?
How do you? Right? You're like, I had to watch. There's a GIF of it. I had to watch that GIF so many times. I'm like, how is this possible? He cracks him in the face and busts him open. You're like, don't they teach you how to take a powerbomb in wrestling school?
Well,
he didn't go to wrestling.
Yeah.
So wouldn't that explain that? But this is what we're talking about though, because in wrestling school, they would teach you that kind of stuff. Not just how to take a powerbomb, but how to take somebody's finisher and to protect and to work all of that stuff. Because wrestling's all a work, right? We know this. It's all a work.
Yeah.
So for that for the business to work, the people inside it have to work on the same page. They have to work under the assumption that they're making the business look good, not making themselves look good, right? Mm-hmm. Because if they start going into business for themselves, they expose the business as a whole. They're just showing off that they can do all this garbage and they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. And it puts a hole in it. So, that's why they probably shouldn't have people like that on their show. That's the one problem I have with All Elite Wrestling is that they have a lot of good talent on there, but they also have a lot of green talent. And there's not a lot of those guys are just wrestling each other. They're not TV ready and they're just fighting each other and it doesn't look right because they don't know how to take all this stuff. Whereas if you were to do that in the WWE, you would inevitably end up with those guys being put up against somebody like Farouk and Bradshaw. Mm-hmm. And famously, Farouk and Bradshaw, they don't take kindly to people sticking around in the business. Speaking of Farouk and Bradshaw, one thing I love the most about the APA is that their shit look real.
Oh yeah, that's probably because it was real.
Yeah, exactly. Like when Bradshaw hits you with a clothesline from hell. Oh, that shit looks like it hurts.
Big
Right?
time.
Oh boy, when Farouk hits you with that spine buster, and again he can when he does it, he puts some stank on it.
Yep.
He throws you down like he fucking hates you. I love that. The Dominator. Farouk's
Yeah.
finishing move where he like lifts you up over his shoulder and then throws you down on your face. Holy shit, dude. That hurts. That hurts just looking at it. That's a finishing move.
Hell yeah.
The fucking Dominator. Good God. But like that's what I loved about the APA is that all their shit looked good. Like it looked like, yeah, I would say a clothesline from hell, that looks like it would finish you. Right? And it's so simple. It's a simple thing, but it's just putting a little bit more stank on a clothesline. And again, it depends heavily on the guy taking the move to be able to sell it right. And like we said, the guy taking the move is going to be able to sell it right because it really hurts.
Yeah, I mean, if you'd see him hit it on the guys who can like flip through the air, that's when it looks almost even better because you get like I think Billy Gunn and Rikishi were two of the best for taking the clothesline from hell because they put that flip on it and make it look like they've just been turned inside out and upside down, and you believe that they probably had been done like hit so hard that they legit kind of flipped inside out.
Rikishi?
Yeah, man, he'd always put a little athletic little twist on it.
You wouldn't think Rikishi's the one doing flips, would you?
I know, but seriously, try and look up a JBL or like Bradshaw Rikishi like match, and you'll see like if he hits the clothesline from hell on Rikishi will sell the hell out of it.
But that's it. Like that's what you want. You want somebody to like really put over your finishing move. That's the point. Again, that's part of the business. The finishing move is the full stop, the final point, and you want to make sure that gets over as well as it possibly can. You know, like the people who sell the spear by Edge, wasn't it? Who was it? AJ Styles like fucked himself up by taking a spear.
Yeah, I think he broke a rib or something, didn't he?
Yeah, because he wanted to make it look good.
Yeah,
and fair play, but also, and it did. It looked great. It really looked like it hurt. And that's what you want. Breaking a rib I think is a little bit. That's a bit too much. You don't have to do that. But it's doing stuff like that really helps sell that move, and especially with a spear, I think that's a very tough finishing move to put over because it's been done so many times. Like that's a tricky one to make look effective because some people used to do spears as like a move in the match.
Yeah.
Like Edge would just use the spear before he used it as a finisher, but Rhino had been using the gore before that.
Goldberg obviously as well.
But Goldberg wouldn't finish a match.
That's true. That. Yeah.
Goldberg used the spear to set up the jackhammer for no good reason. Like you've knocked him down with a spear, now you have to pick him up and do a jackhammer.
Yeah.
Now that is a case of like a little bit too much, I think, with Goldberg. Where like if he hits the spear, that looks like sore as hell, and if he hits the jackhammer, that looks sore as hell. But to do them both really quickly, doesn't that feel like a little bit too much?
I don't know. I think it worked for Goldberg because
he's nothing else to do.
Well, kind of. I mean, his matches were pretty famous for being quite short and like impactful. And having like the big spear, which always looked like a devastating move when he did it, and then feed that into like the anticipation where he picks them up and hooks them up for the jackhammer and just kind of looks around with that intense expression on his face and then powers them up into the air. Like even if it's like a big guy, like, the Giant or whatever, he'll still get him up and then bring him down. Like it all worked for Goldberg and helped make him look like this killer who, legit went undefeated for so long.
I'll give you that, man. I'll give you that. For almost everybody that Goldberg hit with that jackhammer, and obviously there is one major exception we're going to leave out, but for pretty much everybody he hit that jackhammer on, he did it well.
Yeah.
You can say what you want about Goldberg, and we have many times on this show, but the few things he knew how to do, he could do them well.
Mm-hmm.
You can't knock him for that. He could hit his spear, he could hit his jackhammer. They look good, and the jackhammer is a great finishing move.
Yeah.
But then again, it looks so simple, you know. And again, that's one that's been oddly protected. Goldberg used it, and not a whole lot of other people since then have used the jackhammer.
No, I remember Billy Gunn using it for a little while, sort of back in the early 2000s, but I don't think he was using it to win matches.
I don't really like that when you see like other people using somebody else's finishing move in the middle of their match. I don't like that.
Well, I mean, this is the problem with finishing moves. So once they do become popular and cool and whatever, then they just become like more ubiquitous, where they just start popping up in other matches. Like obviously the DDT with Jake the Snake Roberts was like a really good finish, and like then it just became a regular move pretty much, and sort of lost some of its mystique. And I guess you could say the same for like, you know, like the super kick as well. Like Shawn Michaels with Sweet Chin Music, that was fantastic and like believable because he could hit it on anyone, and then he could hit it from out of nowhere, but then he could always like tease it as well, doing the tuning up the band in the corner first to kind of get the crowd going before he like throws the kick out. And now all of a sudden, well, not all of a sudden, but
not
like,
all of a sudden at all.
Like over the last 20 years or so, like everyone does super kicks pretty much, and it's just kind of robbed it of its effectiveness.
Yes, I would agree with that. That's funny that you said the DDT and the super kick, because those are two classic examples of something that used to be a really devastating finishing move. If you go back and watch an old Shawn Michaels match from any time in the 90s, and he hits that super kick, you're like, that guy's dead.
Yeah.
He's dead. He got kicked in the jaw. That's it. And I was like, that's a great finishing move because it's so simple, but you can hit it on anybody. You can hit it out of nowhere, or you can do the fucking tuning up the band, like really milking it thing. It's great. It's a great finishing move. And I guess a lot of indie people seen that. That just became a move that people would do on the independents. Like everybody did a super kick.
Yeah.
Every single person does a super kick. And sometimes it looks great. Stevie Richards used to do a great super kick.
Yep, can't argue with that.
Okay, I thought you were like, really? Lance Storm, great super kick. But Lance Storm didn't always like, that wasn't his finishing move per se.
No.
I think we've talked about this before, but I remember Lance Storm as a quote had said that he didn't have a finishing move, or at least before he got to the WWF, he didn't have a finishing move. He would use moves to gauge how tired his opponent was. So he would wrestle a match, and then if he did a super kick and the guy kicked out of it, he's like, all right, well, now I know I have to up my game and do something more effective than that to put this guy down. Which, when you think about it, is the most logical way. And of course, Lance Storm would be the one to do this, but it's the most logical way to look at it because he's looking at it like it's real, right?
Yeah.
Like, okay, well, if this is real and I hit a super kick on some guy and it doesn't finish him, then it's not a finisher, but it could put down Scotty Duhati. It might not put down The Undertaker. So in the Undertaker match, I have to find a way to put him away. You know, you have to keep finding ways to, you know, I think that shit's really interesting. And I think that that's the stuff that a lot of indie wrestlers think they're doing. Do you know what I mean? Because when you see like all these indie guys and they're doing like loads and loads and loads of moves, I think that in their head, what they're doing is trying to find the point where the other guy just can't kick out anymore, which makes sense. But what they've completely forgot about is like the actual psychology of wrestling, in that if you just hit all these moves at once in a row over and over again, it takes the viewer out of the match because they're like, well, it doesn't feel like a legitimate sport anymore. Typically, I feel like that's one of the things where somebody in a position of like teaching or learning, like Lance Storm, could explain this to people and they would just take it the wrong way and morph it into something ridiculous, which is what I feel like pro wrestling has become now.
Yeah.
Which is a shame. Yeah, I feel like that's a big thing, like a finishing move. We also talked about this last year. SummerSlam, 4 frog splashes.
Yep.
But back in the day, Eddie Guerrero finished people off with his frog splash, and then a different company, Rob Van Damme, finished people off with the frog splash.
Mm-hmm.
What else did you need?
Yeah. Well, even when they were in the same company, they were on different brands and stuff. So.
Well, they did actually. Do you remember they had a feud?
Oh.
Whenever Eddie came back in 2002, they had a feud over the IC title.
Yeah, that rings a bell.
Oh boy, let me tell you, my friends, if you ever get really tired of pro wrestling these days, just go back to 2002 and watch Eddie Guerrero against Rob Van Damme, and you're gonna have a great time. They have, I think, Backlash and Judgment Day 2002. They had 2 amazing matches. Watch those 2 fucking guys. You'll learn a lot. You know? But then again, and also when we say that, Eddie Guerrero did a great frog splash, but RVD did a different frog splash.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
what you want about RVD, but his frog splash looked and felt different, even though it's the same fucking splash, right? Basically, they have an impact to them. Also, the way RVD would sell it, when he landed, he would flip halfway across the ring, holding his own ribs, before he would crawl over to the pin. It makes it look like it really hurts, and it also looks like he's risking the match doing it. Because he's hurting himself, but he's also hurting his opponent. So he's like, am I hurting them more than they're hurting me? It's a risk reward calculation kind of thing. That shit makes sense in the when you think about pro wrestling, right? But if you're just a fucking mark watching that, you're like, I could do that. Or he just jumps, you don't. I don't think people get that kind of nuance. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't want to be one of those little curmudgeon-y old school guys, but I can't help it. So those have been we've talked about a couple of good finishing moves. I do wish the super kick was a little more protected.
Yeah, same.
Because we have both watched Young Bucks matches where they kick people in the face 17 times.
Mm-hmm.
And then they'll hit them with spinning power bombs and shooting star presses off, an airplane. And they'll just do all this weird shit, and then they'll kick them in the face again, and that's the finish. You know, they'll kick him in the face an 18th time, and that's the finish. And then again, you could use the argument, like I explained earlier. They'll say, from an indie point of view, oh, but that's just all he could take. They got to the end of the match, he couldn't take any more kicks. But you're also like, right, but it made the first 17 kicks look like shit. If the first 10 didn't work, right?
Yeah, no.
If they don't work after 5, you're probably going to stop doing it. It doesn't make any sense. That's such a weird way to look at it. Also, have you seen, they do tombstones and spinning pile drivers and stuff, and it looks shit. They did a move. Is it the Meltzer driver, which is assisted tombstone?
Yeah, where he springboards off into a somersault, and then adds a little bit of extra impact, I guess, on the tombstone.
It doesn't, does it? I mean, come on. I watched that. I'm like, why did you do that? And that's what we're talking about. The Tombstone Piledriver used to be a really protected move.
Mm-hmm.
I remember The Undertaker did it. Kane would do it. Logically, he would do it because that was part of the storyline. And I remember Just Incredible doing it. And,
he added a spin to it.
Right. And to be fair, his Tombstone Piledriver looked pretty sick.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But who else was doing it? Mongo, I think, did a Tombstone Piledriver.
Of course, yeah. Jesus, how dangerous did that look every time he did it?
Oh my god, I can't believe I almost forgot about Mongo did a Tombstone Piledriver. Oh. No, if you were a wrestler and somebody was going to hit you with a Tombstone Piledriver, would you want it to be The Undertaker? Or would you like it to be Mongo McMichael?
I mean, I'd prefer The Undertaker, I think.
I feel like it would be safer if The Undertaker did it.
Yeah.
I want to talk real quick about that super kick thing I just talked about, right?
Mm-hmm.
I want to bring up a comparison to something that happened last year with regards to that. So, do you remember the match Walter had with, oh my gosh, who was it with?
Ilya Dragunov?
I don't think it was that one. He had a lot of good matches last year, to be fair. When you look back at 2020, I had a lot of negative things to say about pro wrestling in 2020, but god damn it, if Walter wasn't one of the highlights. Holy shit, every time he was in the ring, you paid attention, right? Because his shit looks good. Not only does he look good, but the way he does stuff looks good. And when he slaps you, when he chops you, that looks like it hurts. That looks like it really hurts, right? Because he's a big guy and he's got these big hands and he slaps at your chest. The way he chops you, that really looked like it would cut down a bigger man. So whenever you see a guy getting chopped a lot by Walter, you know, that's different from the super kicks. Because you can tell that those chops take an awful lot out of the guy taking the chop. Because there was one match where they worked 20 minutes and then at the end of it he chopped him.
Oh, that was against Tommaso Ciampa.
Yeah. Didn't he powerbomb and then chop him and that was the match?
Yeah.
That's a logical way to finish a match. Because by the end of it, Tommaso Ciampa had taken everything that Walter could throw at him and he just couldn't take any more. Right?
Yeah.
But that's totally different from the way that the Young Bucks put together a match. People think that that's the same, but if you watch those two matches, they're psychology-wise are both very, very different. Walter doesn't go out there doing everything he can do because he doesn't have to. He's smarter than that. And I'm sure Walter can go out and do all sorts of shit that you don't know he can do because that's not the point. Right? And that's what grinds me about the Young Bucks is that they do so much all the time that it's kind of impossible to tell what the finishing move is. Right?
Yeah.
If you see them doing a super kick and then later on they win with a super kick, you're like, who gives a shit? But when you see Walter chopping a guy, you get it. You see he's not slapping his own fucking thigh to make that sound. He's chopping the other guy. That's how he makes that sound. He's legitimately chopping the guy.
Exactly. Their chest looks like raw meat once he's finished with them.
Right. And the trick that Walter has is he knows enough about pro wrestling to know what to do to a man. Again, the Lance Storm situation. He knows what to do to a man, and he knows how far to get into a match as to what he has to pull out of his own bag to be able to set this man down, right? And you get that when you watch the match. But you don't get that kind of thing when you watch a Young Bucks match because they're paced differently. Psychology-wise, they're both very different. Even though technically they do similar things. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a psychology thing. It's the way you set the match up, and it's the people involved in the match. Tommaso Ciampa and Walter are two pros of the business. They know exactly what they're doing. And when you watch that match, which might have been one of my favorite matches of 2020, and again, it wasn't hard, right? The competition was pretty fucking lackluster.
Well, it was from this year, so.
Was that one this year?
Yeah. It was the NXT takeover before WrestleMania.
Maybe I was thinking of the Ilya Dragunov one from last year. And then the Tommaso Ciampa one from this year. Because, honest to God, dude, have you seen a better match than that since then?
No, not that I can think of.
And we've seen some decent matches since then.
Yeah.
But why was that match so good? Because it looked real, and the way that it ended was just logical. Right? It wasn't over the top. It just looked like two guys beating the shit out of each other.
Yeah.
I really like that. So that's really important as well. Again, what's Walter's finishing move? Is it the powerbomb? Doesn't he do a Walter bomb, like a kind of like Vader splash?
Not so much a Vader splash, but he does one off the top rope, just a sort of a regular splash off the top rope.
Yeah, which again, you look at Walter, you're like, that shit's gonna kill you. Look at that man, right? That's gonna hurt. And again, he doesn't do it 17 times in one match, and he doesn't do it as a Phoenix Splash or anything like that. He just does it once, and you get it.
Yeah, and even then, he doesn't do it that often as well. I think he did it the one time against Pete Dunne to win the United Kingdom title, and then I think I only remember seeing him do it against Tyler Bate in the match at the Cardiff takeover. But yeah, aside from that, he doesn't really bust it out that often.
But you remember it, and you know that he does it, but he doesn't do it every match. This is important. This is really, and that's why I think the best guys, the best. If you ever think of like your list of the top best wrestlers ever, every single one of them has moves that they know how to do, but they don't do them all the time.
Yeah.
Like Shawn Michaels. Shawn Michaels, I consistently say, is one of the best wrestlers of all time. If you watch a Shawn Michaels match, he'll do bits that he always does. You know, the teardrop suplex, the super kick, elbow off the top, right? But he also knows when to pull out shit in a match. He'll do stuff you've never seen him do before, and you'll never see him do again, because he gets that it needs to be done in that match at that time, right? Other people do that too. CM Punk's really good for that too.
Yeah.
Bret Hart. I think Bret Hart, people slag off Bret Hart for having 5 moves. You're idiots. It's just those are the 5 moves he always uses. But you don't see every Bret Hart match where he's pulling other shit out of the bag, because he's versatile and he knows how to work. Same with Lance Storm. The guy knows shit. They know how to work. You know, they don't do all their shit at once because that's ridiculous. Daniel Bryan, who I think is the best wrestler in the world at the moment. He knows how to do shit, and he knows when to do it. AJ Styles can do an awful lot of stuff. And he's got to that point now where he doesn't do it all in one match. Because what's the point? You don't have to. What you need to do is pick your spots. You know, I think that's why I didn't like AJ Styles too much in TNA, because it was too much, right?
Yeah.
It was fun for one match, but if he's the guy on top all the time, you're gonna see everything that guy has every week. And that's ridiculous. That's not how you do it. People slag off the WWE style of wrestling, but when you think of it like that, it makes way more sense. The reason their main eventers don't do as much as they're supposed to is, one, because it keeps them safe. It means that they can be main eventers forever. But 2, it's because the match doesn't always call for it. You think about Steve Austin. After Owen Hart broke Steve Austin's neck, right? Not on purpose, obviously. I know that's made it sound like he did it on purpose. But whenever that happened, Austin had to brawl more.
Yeah.
He became much more of a brawler. But sometimes he would just pull out weird shit. What was it? I think he just started doing like a figure 4 at some point. He would just start doing stuff, and you're like, because he had to figure out ways to get around his neck problems. He couldn't do everything he was able to do back in the day, but he still had tricks up his sleeve. He could still find ways to finish you off and put you away. And he had to work around his own limitations and figure that out, which is really clever, you know?
Yeah.
Smart psychology, stuff like that, you know? Which I think these days is maybe a little bit lacking. And again, you look at a guy like Drew McIntyre these days, you know that when you watch a Drew McIntyre match, he seems like he gives his all in the ring, but you're also pretty sure that he's not giving you everything he has. There's a couple of moves in the bank that he's going to pull out when he needs to.
Yeah, like the Michinoku driver that he busted out against Braun Strowman the other week.
Right, where the fuck did that come from? That looked like, you know, I have my own issues with that. I think it's a bit weird doing a Michinoku driver on a 7-foot tall guy. Right, but at the same time, it was a great spot in that part of the match, right?
Yeah,
if somebody else was trying to do that spot, I'm sure they can do a Michinoku driver. Taka Michinoku was in that match against Braun Strowman. He can do a Michinoku driver, but would that be the best move to do against Braun Strowman at that time? Probably not.
But I mean, I'd kind of like to see him try, though.
That would be like the Hurricane trying to chokeslam the Big Show.
Yeah.
Oh boy, but like, you know, that I think is a really important thing too. It's like picking your moves and figuring out when to. I feel like we've drifted off somehow.
Yeah.
We were talking about finishing moves, and I have derailed things somewhat in order to slag off modern wrestling. I do apologize. Let's get back on track real quick. Let's talk about what do you think are some of the best, most impactful looking finishers, and what do you think are some of the worst looking finishers?
Well, I mean, I think the Styles Clash is a move which always looked great. Had like a bit of an element of danger to it as well, like if they landed wrongly. But like, you know, since AJ's been in WWE, it's kind of lost its finisher status almost. Like he'll win the occasional match with it still, but like it seems more often he goes for the phenomenal forearm when he's trying to win, or the calf crusher. So,
but then again, like, don't you like that? Don't you like the idea that he's not busting out the Styles Clash on every single match? Like now he's shown versatility with the submission and the phenomenal forearm. That when he does do the Styles Clash, which does look cool as hell, when he does it, you're like, wow, that look cool as hell, right?
mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I mean, at the same time, it's because it looks cool as hell, and like the flying forearm doesn't look that phenomenal. So, you know, I don't know. It's always been one of my favorite moves, and like it was unique as well. Like I had never seen anyone do that before, AJ Styles, not that way. So it always just stood out. And I think any kind of move like that, which looks new and hasn't been used before, kind of deserves a shout as well. Like, I can't believe I'm doing this, but I'm going to give Baron Corbin some props because the End of Days is one of those moves which is so unique looking, and it's been really well protected by WWE as well. Like, I'm fairly certain no one's kicked out of it. And that's like John Cena did a couple of years ago or something.
John Cena doesn't count. Like if you hit your finishing move on John Cena, there's a good chance he's gonna kick out.
Yeah, I mean that's a given. But I mean it's a sweet looking move, and it's just a shame it belongs to Baron Corbin.
I agree. I think it is a cool looking move. I'm not as sorry on Baron Corbin as you are. I think obviously I don't think he's the best ever, but I mean, he does what he does in a decent way. We're not gonna. Baron Corbin episode will be next week. But yeah, I agree with what you're talking about with his finishing move. It does look cool, right? And it does look kind of impactful.
Yeah.
So you're like, all right, cool. I like that, and it's a good way to get somebody over with a cool finish.
And he's hit it on some big guys as well that you wouldn't have expected him to hit it on. So, like, it has that versatility as well.
Okay, well, what about not so good finishers?
I mean, I never really liked the heart punch. I think you mentioned it earlier on. But yeah, that was one of those moves which just looks so lame to me. It's like, oh, you punched him in the chest. So?
Yeah, like, kayfabe, you're like, I get it. He's punched him in the heart. Technically, that's impactful. But at the same time, you just see a guy. If you watch a 20-minute match where people are punching each other anyway, and if somebody does a big punch, it's what we were saying with the knockout punch. You're like, why didn't you just do that? And it's the same with this Anthony Ogogo guy. It kind of like exposes too much when it comes to putting a match together. You're like, well, why didn't you just do that? why are Cody Rhodes' kidneys immune to that?
Yeah.
Like that because that's part of the fun of a really competitive back and forth match is whenever Austin kicks a guy in the gut and he goes for the stunner, but the guy pushes him against the ropes and he comes back and he hits him with his finishing move, but then Austin gets out of that. You know what I mean? Like there's a twist and turn and stuff. If you just punch a guy in the kidneys and then the guy just gets up and is like, nope. You're like, what fight is this?
Yeah. There's no drama there.
No, it's not at all the same, So yeah, so like punch moves.
Yeah, you can add in like the Cobra and like
the Cobra. That should have been number one, surely.
Yeah. Well, I'd say the Great Khali's like overhand chop as well. Yeah, like that just. I know he's, obviously a 7-foot tall giant and bigger and stronger than most other people, but even still, he's still a chop.
Well, what about like the Samoan Spike?
That one is a weird one because it's always. I mean, it's the same situation essentially, where it's just like a one-off strike or whatever, which on its own doesn't look that impressive, but the way Umaga used to do it did. Like, he'd look all crazy when he was about to throw it and then just, like, really jab it in there. and then you have the people who were taking it selling it like death as well, and like I don't know, I can see why people would not be impressed with it as a finishing move, but it always stuck out to me as like a kind of a decent one.
But then when you get a guy like Umaga doing that, like when you see him doing a splash, like with Walter, when you see Umaga doing a splash up the top rope, you're like, oh shit, dude, you've just crushed the other guy.
Mm-hmm.
That looks way more impactful as a finishing move than the Samoan Spike to me.
Yeah.
So you're like, well, why not do that instead of the old thumb to the head, right? Because the old thumb to the head doesn't win you a match, right?
I'm guessing probably to save his knees, so he's not like jumping onto them every night or whatever. But
well, but that's the thing. Like a guy like Umaga, his shit looked good anyway. He was such a big, imposing looking dude that whatever he did to you would usually look pretty. That's why I always felt like the Samoan Spike wasn't a great finishing move, because you're like, anything that guy does to you looks like it's gonna hurt.
yeah, like his pop-up Samoan drop was badass.
Except the fucking thumb to the head. If the pop-up Samoan drop was the end of the match, I dig it because it hurts. Ask Steve-O.
But I guess it's one of those things where you can't hit it on everyone again, whereas the Spike you can.
Splash you can.
Yeah.
See? Just saying. I was never a big fan of that kind of move or anything like that. But wonder what would be the best finishing move? Don't know.
I mean, I would say the RKO.
Well, you know what? That's so funny because I was just about to say the diamond cutter.
I mean, you can't go wrong with it because it ticks all the right boxes. It's one that can be hit on anyone, that comes from out of nowhere, that looks cool, and it's versatile as well. Like the different ways that DDP would hit it back in WCW, and like Randy Orton has done the same sort of thing as well. Like everyone remembers his counter to Evan Bourne's shooting star press, which was another cool finisher.
Yes.
But like the way he caught him there, and the way he countered Seth Rollins' curb stomp as well, and all these other ones. Like it's a move which can look cool just by the different ways you can hit it, and it's another one that's been really well protected over the years as well.
And it's very simple.
Yeah,
it's straight ahead. You like, I get it. You visually, you get it. You see it. You're like, all right, that clearly hurts. They don't have to get too fancy with it. Sometimes simple is better. Stuff like that. I think, it's hard to go wrong with Diamond Cutter, the Ace Crusher, if you will.
Yeah.
Do you remember the Stump Puller?
That was Doink's old move, wasn't it?
Yeah. I always thought that was one of the strangest finishing moves.
What actually was it again?
All right, so imagine this. Let me try to describe it to you. But there's a guy, your opponent, sitting in the ring, all right, like on his butt. His legs are right in front of him. And you come up behind them, and you kind of like sit on his shoulders.
Right.
Right? And then you hit one of his legs, and you pull the leg towards you. That's the Stump Puller.
Right. Yeah.
That's it. You're like, what? Who came up with this?
Yeah.
Sometimes you'll see a finishing move, you're like, I think you need to think that one out a little bit clearer. Like visually it doesn't work. Like sometimes I don't like, the old jumping DDT people would do.
Yeah.
The leaping DDT. I don't like that. I don't like finishing moves that don't look like the guy hitting it is actually hitting it. Because with a jumping DDT, it looks a little bit like the other guy is kind of lifting that guy up.
Yeah.
And then they fall down and do a DDT. You're like, that doesn't look right. So I don't like moves that don't look like they're actually being done to the person.
Like a Canadian destroyer.
Right. Oh, come on, man. We don't even have to start talking about the Canadian Destroyer. Excuse me. That used to be a fucking cool move, but the more you see it, the more you're like, it's very contrived.
Yeah, it's always looked contrived, but it always looked cool as well, which I think is why that's another one which ended up getting used
Till
just
those
as a
fucking
regular
indie
move.
guys,
Yeah.
those fucking indie guys started fucking ruining it, and you're like, well, it doesn't look cool at all now. John Cena's doing that shit.
Yeah, Bad
And
Bunny.
like we, right? Bad Bunny's doing your finishing move. Maybe it's not so good, you know. Let me tell you another one real quick that I don't really like.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe this is controversial. Sister Abigail.
No, I can kind of understand that.
It wasn't at the Crossroads as well.
What are they the same move? Do you mean?
Well, what's the difference between Sister Abigail and the Crossroads?
The Sister Abigail is like a swinging reverse STO, whereas the Crossroads is it's the roll of the dice that Reno used to do in WCW.
Reno, my good friend Reno. Right, but isn't that? Oh wait, is that the overdrive? No.
What's the overdrive? Who did
the overdrive? Is like you kind of put your knee on the back of the guy's head and then you fall.
Oh no. Yeah, that was like similar to the Playmaker or whatever that MVP used to do. Yeah, that wasn't a very good move. No. It didn't look at all.
So hang on, what's the Crossroads then?
So that's where they grab him in a reverse face lock,
like Sister Abigail.
No, because you're not grabbing in a reverse face lock with Sister Abigail. You kind of got him in a Uranagi almost, like with their arm kind of wrapped around you, but like you're bending over forward.
Well, you're bending over, right? But if you're in a slightly different position, if you turn your arm around, you would be holding them in a face lock, like in a Crossroads.
No, like the Sister Abigail, you're basically standing chest to chest with your opponent.
Well, no, you start off that, but when he turns him over, right, and he bends him over and he kisses him on the head.
Yeah.
Right. When you're standing like that, if the way he's standing with one arm kind of wrapped around their shoulder, yes.
Yeah.
If he used the other arm to put that guy in a face lock, wouldn't that be the Crossroads?
No.
And then he spins around.
Then it just turned into like a spinning DDT.
Which is?
Not a Crossroads.
I don't know about that. What is a cross? I feel like they're very similar looking moves. I'm going to put in the video this, whether or not I'm right or not, I'm going to put a video side by side of the Crossroads and the Sister Abigail. So if I'm wrong, everybody can make fun of me. But I feel like they look fairly similar.
Only in that they've got a spin to them, but
yeah.
I mean, other than that, there's no similarity whatsoever.
Okay, well, I guess we'll see. Anyway, I don't really like Sister Abigail. The finishing move, not the person. I'm sure the person's lovely.
Yeah.
I mean, not that lovely. She brainwashed Bray Wyatt. I don't really. Yeah, I guess the Diamond Cutter is probably the best finishing move visually. I mean, there's been some good ones, you know. I mean, there's also been some bad ones. Let's put it that way. Real quick, right before we stop, I want to say that one thing I don't like, and we have talked about this before, is the way Seth Rollins will do like the superplex off the top rope into a Falcon Arrow.
Yeah.
I'm like, that should be the finish. That looks great. That looks amazing. That should be the finish. How is that not the finish?
Especially since he's kind of ruined the curb stomp when he like hit it 12 times on Bray Wyatt in that Hell in a Cell match and still couldn't beat him with it.
What? Yeah, exactly. You know, and the curb stomp was supposed to be this really devastating move they didn't want to do anymore. His kids are replicating it. And now they're doing it like fucking, it doesn't hurt anybody. Not a good way to do business, man. Anything else you want to say in regards to finishing maneuvers?
I mean, that's so much we didn't really cover here. Like, we didn't really talk about submissions at all, or tag team finishing moves, or, you know, a lot of top rope finishing moves either, but...
We talked about that frog splash.
We talked about the frog splash and sort of mentioned the shooting star press briefly, but yeah, I mean, there's good finishing moves that can be hit from any kind of position, and you know, I think that's the thing that you just need as a superstar. Like the thing that kind of helps take superstars to like a new level. Like you think, would Steve Austin have been as popular without the Stone Cold Stunner? I mean, probably, yeah, but
Probably.
but I mean, it was still a big part of his act and like something that fans connected with. And you can say like the pedigree helped make Triple H look stronger. The Tombstone obviously was a devastating move for the Undertaker, and all these kind of legends who've used these finishing moves to like great effect over the years. It kind of shines a light on like, well, do we really still have that these days? And I'm not sure that we really do anymore. And it's kind of a bummer.
True. I feel like a finishing move is part of the whole package, right? It's part of like, you know, their look and their demeanor and their entrance music. It's all like part of the plan to make one guy, you know. That's how you do it. But I also feel like you said maybe they're not putting as much care and attention into that kind of stuff as they should be. Except for Baron Corbin, as you rightly pointed out. One of the best, I think we'll all agree.
My new favorite wrestler.
Yeah, well, you know, who else is it going to be? The Miz? No, he died. He's dead forever and he'll never come back.
Uh-oh.
He'll never come back, John.
Okay.
He's never coming. We all saw him being eaten by zombies. If the payoff isn't that the Miz is dead forever, then why else would they do that? John,
I'm not saying anything.
Why else would they do that? You can't bring him back. Anyway. Oh, what was the Miz's finishing move? He used to do like a swinging neck breaker, which looked like shit.
Oh yeah, didn't he do it? I can't remember what it's called, but he'd do like a reverse DDT into a backbreaker and then swing it around to the neck breaker.
Do you remember him doing the figure four after Ric Flair did the whole fucking bullshit and he would do the figure four? And you're like, listen, man, that's one of the worst figure fours. I mean, objectively speaking, I know I'm not a big fan of The Miz, but be perfectly honest with everybody here. The Miz doing the figure four leg lock, not good.
I think they just like assumed he knew how to put it on, and it clearly wasn't the case.
They assumed he knew how to wrestle.
Yeah.
Not good. Not good. But there we go. Those are some finishing moves. I think we'll have to do another episode about this at some point. Like you said, with the tag team finishing moves, because sometimes tag team finishing moves can look really fucking sick.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sometimes not so much. But sometimes they look really cool. Submission moves as well. There's some really good submission moves that we could definitely talk about. So I would very much like to talk about this topic again in the future. What about you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. Well, in that case, if you guys out there listening on YouTube land or wherever you might be listening to this are interested in hearing us discuss some more finishing moves, we would love to do it. Let us know in the comments below. And also, make sure to like and subscribe and do all the other shit you're supposed to do on YouTube, because that really helps us out and it helps people notice our show. And if people know the show, then we can grow and we can talk more about how much The Miz is terrible. And everybody wants that. They all want to hear me talking about how much I hate The Miz. Except me. I'm fed up with doing it. But that's the show. I think next week we're going to be back again with another excellent episode talking about who knows what. Maybe it'll be more finishing moves. You don't know. The only way to find out is to subscribe. So do that. Thank you very much. And I guess we'll see you in the next episode. So thank you very much for listening, guys. And we'll see you soon. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.